And I will start with reading the script. Basically, I am the Select Board Chair, Tom Lacusa. I'll be confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Strange. Here. And Mark Gold.
Here.
Steve Morantz. Here. And Richard Foster.
Here.
Okay, and staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lynn Simons.
Here.
Paul Pasturzik.
Here.
Mark Barbieri.
Here.
Okay, and the anticipated speaker on the agenda, Chief John Dearborn.
Chief Dearborn's just running a few minutes late, but he will be here.
Okay, great. So this open meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you find posted with this agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. The Long Meadow Select Board is convening by Zoom webinar as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. There is no chat or Q&A function. For resident comments, using the Zoom webinar format, members of the public are attendees. And if a member of the public would like to speak during the resident comment, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. The meeting moderator will unmute you and give you permission to speak. If you join the webinar by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Members of the public who wish to speak will identify their names and addresses only. Each individual is afforded 3 minutes for comment. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by a video conference. All the materials for this meeting are available on the agenda posted on longmeadow.org. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps to generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And that is where we're at. And so generally we start the agenda if there's any announcements, or actually, I guess we start with the COVID-19 announcements. Is the chief with us?
He's not back yet. He was at a brush fire. He's on his way back now. We can move on to announcements and come back to him when he gets here if you'd like.
Yes. Okay. Great. So, Lynn, do you have any?
Yes, we do. We have a few. So Eversource Gas Work has started. They have contracted with Feeney Brothers Utility Services, and they're going to be replacing gas mains throughout areas of town. The map is located on the town website demonstrating where work will occur. Work started today and is expected to last through July. You can call the DPW's engineering department at 413-567-3400 if you have any questions. The DPW has moved into their new building at 170 Dwight Road. So you can, the phone numbers are all still the same and you can reach them via calling by phone, but they are in the new facility now. The recycling center is offering spring hours now. Those are Saturdays from 8 to 5, Sundays from 10 to 5, and Wednesdays from 10 to 5. The Longmeadow Community Earth Day cleanup is scheduled to take place on Sunday, April 11th at 1 p.m. They had an overwhelming outpouring of volunteer support. I think they have over 150 volunteers that will be canvassing the town in certain areas to clean it up. And the select board is accepting nominations for its annual Citizen of the Year award. The recipient will be announced at the annual town meeting on May 16th. And letters of nomination should be mailed to the select board office at 20 William Street or emailed to adminassistant@longmeadow.org by Friday, April 16th.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the board on the announcements? Okay, now for the cleanup on the 11th, which we hope a lot of folks will turn out for, hopefully we'll have nice weather. There is a rain date, I believe, also, but we'll let you know. Now, if folks haven't signed up in advance and don't have a specific location to gather at, is there a main location that people driving by could just join the cleanup?
At this point, they have reached capacity on what's allowed to gather for outdoor gatherings. So they have over 150 volunteers right now.
Okay, so those of you who missed your opportunity this year, we look forward to next year. Okay, thank you. All right.
Tom, we have a Citizens of the Year award. What's the other one?
The other one is, yeah, I don't have it about me, but there is a person who's made outstanding contribution to the year 2020.
That'd be Citizen of the Year, right?
No, that's the second award that we had put together. Let me see if I got that right here.
Yeah, I thought we were along the line of lifetime achievement and then Citizen of the Year or some kind of wording like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I know that I told them in that article that's in the reminder, the names of them, two of them, but I don't have those in front of me. I can check and I'll let you know before the end of the meeting, Richard. All right?
No, that okay. That's no problem. I just a curiosity question.
Okay, great. All right. And so the next thing on our agenda would be going to, well, we have listed Eric Lesser and Representative Ryan Ash, and Senator Lesser had a conflict with being here for the meeting. And do we have Brian Ash with us this evening?
I haven't seen him join yet, but Chief Dearborn is here now.
Oh, well, that works out perfect for Brian. Okay. Chief, can you give us our COVID-19 report?
I apologize. You guys are like my jinx. Every time I try to come to one of your meetings, I end up going to a call. So thank you to everybody for having me once again. I'm trying to be brief. We are seeing an uptick in cases in town. Over the past 2 weeks, we've seen about a 29% increase in cases, which is concerning. We're at 33 active cases today. We had gone down into the teens prior to that. We are watching it. We had some discussions today. I apologize for the radio in the background. We had some discussions today about the variants. We're not getting any data from the state as far as that goes. But we are watching it closely, working with the school department, and obviously watching all the activities in town as far as masking and things like that. As far as the vaccine stuff goes, we did receive 100 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine this week. We do have a list that was generated through the Council on Aging and some other folks. We're going to be initiating homebound vaccinations on Thursday, Friday, and Monday coming up. We have a list of those. folks. Certainly, if anyone out there knows anybody that's homebound, has not been able to access vaccination services, contact the health office at 565-4140 or the Council on Aging. I just want to give some props out to the Council on Aging staff for their hard work. They've been booking a lot of appointments, particularly Lindsay Gill. She's done a great job assisting people getting vaccination appointments and building our list for the at-home population. So hopefully that was brief enough. If there's anything I missed there, take questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chief. So are there any questions for Chief Dearborn? Anyone? Okay, I don't see that. So, all right. So we'll move on. Has Brian Ash been able to make it yet? I know he was here a month and a half ago, and we were bringing it back. He could be talked out, but I don't think so.
He hasn't joined yet.
Okay, well, when he shows, we can fit him in. He may not have a lot to report because he was here recently. So we'll go to resident comments. And Lynn, do we have any folks that are asking to make a comment this evening?
If you do want to make a comment, if you could please raise your hand or *6 to unmute yourself.
And folks making a comment would start with your name and your address.
I don't have anyone yet, Tom, that's identified as wanting to speak.
Okay, then I guess we can move on to select board comments. If we have any select board comments this evening. I see Steve Morantz raising his hand.
Yes, I have a comment. I'm not sure everyone has heard or read the news, but the biomass plant that Palmer Paving wanted to build in Springfield has been nixed by the state's Department of Environmental Protection, I believe. And it looks like it's pretty well put to bed, we hope. And I think that while I don't think that the majority vote of the Select Board of Long Meadow made put it over the finish line, I think that us weighing in on our neighbor, us breathing the air that this stuff would have put out, this plant that does not fit the environmental standards that I think we want. I think it's good for Springfield. I think it's good for Western Massachusetts, and I think it's good for us that we did what we did.
Great, thank you. Any other select board comments? Okay, well, I'd like to I guess first I'd start by saying that I want to thank the residents from Long Meadow who stepped up to talk to the select board about what their opinions were about this biohazard that was in Springfield. The next thing is, hopefully folks saw the article in the reminder about Long Meadow Days not happening this year, and the decision really to end the Long Meadow Day gathering. And it's been such a big part of this town. I mean, all my children used to go there, and I know a lot of folks who grew up here would go, and then even as adults, they would go back with their parents. And it was a nice spot. It was kind of a nice gathering in a beautiful area on our green. It sort of drew attention to a spot of the town that we just drive by, and most people don't spend any time on it. But I guess the reason I'm mentioning it is because I would like to see some other groups step up, and there may be some group that would be willing to coordinate something, some sort of a town green event like Long Meadow Days. And or the other thing would be that we had talked about closing off the street down by the Long Meadow shops for a lacrosse or field hockey event. And maybe when they have their annual sidewalk sale, the folks from the shops would be interested in stepping up, taking an opportunity to turn that into a bigger event that may even bring some out-of-town vendors in who would sell their wares in the parking lot. We'd close the streets and bring the town together. You know, it's a shame to, you know, I don't know if this is the right year because of COVID, but it would be a shame to lose the one opportunity that people in our town get together locally, and you can meet your neighbors and check in with folks. And it also brings people from out of town into Longmeadow to see our town, which is always, you know, it's a nice thing because we have a beautiful town. And that's my comment. And any other comments? Mark Gold.
I just want to make a comment that continues on about the Hamilton County Regional Retirement Board. I think there's been a lot of news recently about some changes, but I think that there's, you know, Longmeadow was the first regional select board to step up and ask for there to be changes. I think changes continue to need to be made, not just with the chair of the board, but also the board makeup and the other people there. And I think we've got a huge financial stake in this. And, you know, I don't know what the final outcome is going to be, but I want to thank Paul Sturzik, Lynn Simmons, who've been very, very active in continuing to keep the pressure on making sure that organization looks out for the best interests of not only its constituents, which are the members who have their retirement tied up there, but also the towns who have significant financial investments in the Hamilton County Regional Retirement Board. It's not a done deal in terms of the reforms that need to be made, and I just wanted people to know that we're still something we need to be vigilant about and work on.
Okay, great. Any other comments? All right, so we can move on. Is Brian Ash? Well, why don't you just let me know when he's here?
Tom, looking back, it looks like it was supposed to be a joint discussion with Senator Lesser and Rep. Ash. And when Senator Lesser was unable to attend to a conflict tonight, Rep. Ash was informed and they will not be here tonight.
Okay, so we'll look forward to both of them in a future meeting. Thank you. I guess the next thing would be the town manager's report.
Thank you. So tonight I'm pleased to report that a permanent replacement has been made to fill the vacant administrative assistant role. Interim admin assistant Mike Barbieri was selected to fill the role permanently. To remind you, Mike most recently assisted the COVID team in preparing for vaccination clinics. And before that, he served as the school age before and after school coordinator for the Parks and Rec Department. Mike can be reached at adminassistant@longmeadow.org. An interim DPW director has been retained. It's a face and name that'll be familiar to most of you. It's Jay Monahan. He served as interim town manager between Stephen Crane and myself. He is going to be here in person beginning tomorrow. He's been working virtually for the last 2 weeks, but he will be in person 3 to 4 days a week beginning tomorrow. Russell Field dugouts. The contract was awarded to Campora Construction to build 2 dugouts at Russell Field in the amount of $32,000. Work is expected to be completed by April 30th. Bliss Park baseball fields, Longmeadow Little, we do in the fall. The farmer would farm the fields all summer season. The town did not receive any lease payments for the use of the fields for farming purposes, and we ended up paying for that farmer to turn the fields over. This year, with Chad's perseverance, we took this project out to bid, and the town will yield approximately $58,155 in revenue annually for the next 3 years, which equates to about $174,000 over these 3 years. After the cost to dispose the leaves and mow the landfill, the new capped landfill is taken care of. So obviously this is a major revenue increase for a practice that really needed a fresh look. So a huge thank you to Chad for seeing that through. Traffic rules and regulations. There's a binder in the police department that holds very historic traffic rules and regulations. The traffic committee began looking at this document recently after a few questions came in about roadway practices. One of the most recent was a question about one-way traffic on Longmeadow Street east of the Green during school hours. The rules and regulations are going to undergo a review and be incorporated into the E-code work that general code is doing for our zoning and general bylaws. It's then going to be turned into a very easy to find and search document on the town website. We talked about some COVID-19 updates already, but just briefly, we're in phase 4, step 1. Town departments are preparing reopening plans, specifically the adult center for the new building and the Parks and Recreation Department. They're pulling together plans for camps and opening the pools this summer. The homebound vaccination plan has launched. There was a press release that was put out late last week. If you have anybody that you know of that needs a vaccine and they can't get out of their house, please reach out to lgill@longmeadow.org. Or certainly if you're a resident or a town employee that needs help getting a vaccine appointment and you're currently eligible, you can certainly reach out to Lindsay Gill, lgill@longmeadow.org for assistance. And I'd also just like to thank Lindsay Gill and Christine George. They've been tremendous in helping people schedule appointments both at mass vaccination sites and at pharmacy locations for eligible residents and staff. They've been a great help. The Board of Health recently met last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, March 16th, and discussed the basketball courts. The courts have been closed since the summer due to complaints about the misuse of COVID practices there. The Board of Health recently met and reviewed the court closure and also community case counts and test positivity rate. And at the March 16th meeting, the board voted that if our community case counts and test positivity rate were the same, or we were in better shape than we were on March 16th, then we could open the basketball courts on April 1st. Unfortunately, when we pulled the numbers in advance of that April 1st deadline, so on March 31st, we reviewed that and our cases had gone up to 38 cases and we had a 2.38% test positivity rate. So the courts are going to remain closed right now and they'll continue to be reviewed as we look at our case numbers. And the new public health director has started. His first day in the office was March 29th, and he's continued to return to work, so that's a positive. I only have a few more things. This is a long one tonight. The Historic District Commission is currently reviewing an application for a certificate of appropriateness from the Veteran Services Director and the Veterans Council. This would cover the installation of American flags on the ornamental light poles along the green. I did draft a letter of support for this application, which is a project that I had been working on with Lena and the veterans since January of 2020. The hearing was continued to allow for a temporary installation for the Historic District Commission to see how it will actually look. So more information on that will be forthcoming in the next few weeks. The Hampden County Regional Retirement Board, since our last meeting in March, PARAC has issued a temporary order to the Hampden County Regional Retirement Board that includes weekly conference calls between PARAC and HCRRB staff to review the status of audit findings, as well as establishing internal controls. They are now required to have a monthly production of financial documents over to PARAC each month, and any out-of-state or overnight travel requests by board members and staff must be submitted 1 week in advance to PARAC for pre-approval, and all requests for reimbursements for related expenses to travel will not be reimbursed until submitted and approved by PARAC. And they also need to develop an internal control plan within 90 days. The middle school facilities assessment, this was a project that had started before COVID. It was a statement of interest had been submitted. The Longmeadow Public Schools had submitted a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority to address the facility-related needs at Glenbrook and Williams Middle School. To augment and update that application, Longmeadow Public Schools has partnered with Colliers International to complete a facilities condition assessment at each school. The study is going to help understand the cost and scope of needed repairs, and we should expect that report sometime in this month. And the Department of Public Health launched a Public Health Excellent Grant Program for shared services. This makes grant funding available for communities who are exploring sharing public health services. working with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, the town has moved forward as a lead agency. So the town of Longmeadow with PVPC have applied for this grant. Longmeadow would be the lead community. It would, if awarded, we would receive up to $300,000 annually over the next 3 years. So a total of almost $900,000 to create this public health shared service program. Our application includes the communities of Hamden, Munson, and Wilbraham. That's what I have to report tonight.
Okay, that's great. Any questions from the board for the town manager on the report?
Yeah, I had one question, Tom. Lynn, you mentioned about that initiative that Chad took. Was that on his own?
So last fall, after I started here, he approached me with it and said, I think that this is a practice that we need to take a fresh look at. It's been done this way for as long as he's been here, and he felt strongly that it should go out to bid. Last winter, we kind of ran out of time between it being, me being fairly new and then being hit with the pandemic. We didn't have time to put the lease out to bid last year. And so we both committed that we would review this early in the fall and get this package ready to go out. And Chad did all the work for it, and he put it out to bid, and this is what we're seeing now as the result, which is tremendous.
Oh, it's fantastic results. Well, I guess kudos to both of you for him bringing it up and for you supporting him and letting him move forward. You're right, long overdue. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I feel the same way about the plowing of the fields and the deal that is set up. That's great. The only person I think that might want to drive his tractor down there was Richard Foster. I'm sure he would have loved to drive around those fields every day for a while, but you'll have to go out to next time out for bid, Richard. This could be you. I hope.
Have you seen the size tractors they use down there, Tom?
Actually, I know. I never see them. I always just
my
see
God,
them.
they're monstrous tractors. I think they could take my tractor and put it in the bucket on theirs.
All right. Well, good. Yeah, Lynn, great job on that. And thank you for your report. And again, congratulations, Mark Barbieri, joining us permanently. You've been doing a great job so far. So next we will look at old business. And we have a draft of meeting minutes for 3/15/21 that we need to get approved. We have a motion.
Were those sent out, Tom? I never saw them.
Well, they're on the agenda.
Yeah, they are included on the agenda.
I must be getting the wrong agenda because they're not on my agenda. I'm looking at the agenda right now. There's nothing there.
Right. So we had an agenda for our executive session, and then this agenda that says Select Board regular meeting April 5th.
I got it. I'll send it back to you.
Huh.
I don't have them.
Okay, I'll place a motion on the table that we approve the draft minutes of the 3/15/21 regular Select Board meeting.
Okay, and we second?
Second.
Okay, so what might make a good idea is, Lynn, can you make me a presenter? Perhaps I'll just put it on the Zoom so Mark can see these.
No, I'm not going to be able to read them, Tom. So don't waste your time. I'll just abstain. I mean, I literally am looking at the agenda. I didn't get it.
All right, we have a couple of them. All right, so then, any other discussion on this? Hearing none. Mike, will you do a roll call vote?
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Abstain.
And Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to place a motion on the table that we accept the draft minutes of the special Select Board meeting of March 10th, 2021.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote?
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange? Yes. Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Abstain.
and Mr. Foster.
Yes.
We have been busy. We have another meeting.
I'd like to place a motion on the table that we accept the draft minutes of the special select board meeting of March 9th, 2021.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Abstain.
and Mr. Foster.
Yes.
All right. Next order of business is to appoint a member to the audit committee. We met with Mr. Joseph Santaniello. Last meeting, we are looking for an appointment to a one-year associate term expiring 6/30/21. So
I'd like to place a motion on the floor that we appoint Joseph Santinello to the one-year associate term expiring 6/30/2021.
a second,
Second.
any discussion? All right. Mike Barbieri, do a roll call vote?
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
and Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Next is the water and sewer rate structure follow-up from the public forum. We wanted to have a little discussion to see what our next steps should be after the input we've got from residents and the presentations that were given. So we do know is there any, I guess the first place to start, there is a warrant article to ask the town to allow people to install meters. Lynn, has there been any change on that warrant article? Or have you heard if they're going to withdraw it? It has to be on the warrant, but I mean, they could ask for no action. Have you heard anything?
I have not heard anything.
Okay, so we should make the assumption that that is going to move forward. And so where do we want to go at this point? What's the next step?
I ask a question.
Yes, Mark. Strange.
So, following up on that, Tom, so what happens if, we decide on a different route, like something like winter averaging, and are we assuming that if we get this done before town meeting, that the sponsor of that warrant article will pull it from town meeting? And if they don't, how does that muddy the waters?
Yes, well, I believe I should let Paul Pasturzek answer this because I asked the same question. And so, Paul, you want to take that?
Whatever process you go through, you probably have to assume that one or the other. I don't know which one you want to assume. It's going to pass or it's going to be pulled. That's going to be up to you folks. But whichever route you decide, it should be taken into consideration when the rates are established through whatever method you also choose also. So it's kind of wide open at this point in time, Mark. And again, I don't know what your assumption the board wants to make on that, but one assumption or another should be taken into consideration during the methodology and the rate setting process.
So conceivably, we could have a winter averaging approach with secondary meters being allowed.
If you set the rate, certainly, or do the vote on the methodology before the town meeting, yeah, you could end up having that, yes.
Well, we could even have a vote after that, though, couldn't we, Paul?
Yeah, well, yes, you could vote to amend it afterwards, yes.
Okay.
My feeling is that if we did something else, winter averaging, the need for a second meter would kind of be diminished. And I think the folks who are going to want to put in a second meter, their economic incentive would probably be eliminated by such a move. But I want a little further discussion because Mark Strange did send out a missive to us. And well, I think it's important that we actually come up with some sort of solution relatively soon. We still have 5 or 6 weeks before town meeting. The concept of, realizing all the work that Richard and Mark have done, the concept of having a couple of the folks, citizens, and folks actually work, in the departments that deal with this for the town is not a bad idea. While I'm certainly leaning forward, leaning towards the winter averaging route, it makes sense. I know it was proposed once and was rejected by town meeting, but based on reading and dollars and cents and who gets hurt and who doesn't, I know Mark and Richard did not look at what happens if we just have a set sewer rate, fixed rate. This is what it takes to fit the bill. Everyone pays X amount of dollars per year, and that takes care of the sewer costs. And then we have a separate water cost. That has not been looked at. And I'm not so sure that should not be looked at. I think that has some merit to it, particularly in terms of making sure that if I don't use a whole lot of water, I'm not overpaying. But I like Train's suggestion before we make a final vote.
Yeah, well, my takeaway from other presenters too was that basically we want a system that's really consistent, that people's bills are going to be equivalent to their use, that folks who are using a lot of water wouldn't be paying the same fee as someone who's using very little water. I mean sewer. People who were putting less in the sewer system would not be paying the same amount as someone who's putting a great deal of amount of sewer. So that's that part. But the other reality is that as much as people can think that, they are watering their lawns and it isn't going to end up in the sewer system, in reality, that water has to go somewhere. It goes water, gets into the storm sewers. It creates sand and, it creates hazards, to the sewer system. I mean, it isn't like watering your grass doesn't affect our sewer system. I mean, so the only thing is people would say, well, we're not going to have to pay for that because we're coming out of a different source and it's not going into the sewer system of our home, but it is going into the sewer system through the soil. It isn't like it just disappears. Water never disappears. Okay, thank you. Mark Gold.
And I guess my question at this point for really Tom, Steve, and Mark Strange is what additional information is needed? Is it an independent opinion or advice from Pete Thurber or somebody from an outside organization? Is that what's missing? Because, clearly we've got, we know that any decision we make is going to impact somebody. It's going to impact some people. We've seen it. Everything impacts some people positively and some people negatively. And it's just a matter of making the decision that's got the best, in my opinion, best balance that reflects what we really are using and putting down the sewer. But, again, it's, I don't know that we can get more information, but we could probably present it differently if that's what folks are looking for.
Okay, Mark Strange.
Thanks, Mark. So, I think I'm probably the slowest one on the uptake here, but I am getting, based upon what you and Richard have presented and others, I do think that a 5-month winter averaging is probably a pretty reasonable way to go. So that's where my opinion now. But I do have a couple of other questions that I don't know that can be effectively or efficiently hashed out amongst us. And the first one is how do we, and I know you talked about this a little bit, Mark, I think it went over my head. So what happens how do we account for within a winter averaging approach? How do we account for snowbirds who don't use anything during those months?
Mark, oh, yes.
So, first of all, I'm going to speak for Richard, and then he can speak for himself. But I think he's coming to us a different spot than where he was maybe several months ago, and I'm going to a different spot, certainly from where I was several months ago. We clearly need to account for winter zeros. The good news is, Lynn sent us a copy of what Munis can do. Anything we can think of, Munis can do. Anything we've thought of, and some things we haven't thought of, Munis can do. In other words, it can eliminate zeros from the average. It can put in a minimum value for the winter usage. And remember, it's not what your winter charge is. People, when we say it's a minimum value, what it is it's your minimum summer value, not your. If you actually use zero in the winter, you're going to get billed for zero. If you actually use zero in the summer, you're going to get billed for zero. But if you actually use 30 in the summer, you're going to get billed for whatever we set as the floor, which may be 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever units it is. So people get all upset saying, we're going to raise everybody's rate. Munis can put in a system where you never pay for more than you use, and you will always pay less than you use if we go to a winter, whether it's a winter averaging or winter maximum or whatever it is we decide to go to. So, Mark, the answer to your question is, I think I've come around to we can't let those zeros go in there. How we account for it, whether we set a floor or we just eliminate zeros, is a different, is I think a relatively straightforward decision to make. And with that, I'm going to let Richard see if he's got, since I spoke for him, if he has any other comments.
No, I think Mark summed it up. Mark Strange, within Munis, which we didn't know at our last meeting, they have covered every single scenario that Mark and I have talked about for the last couple of months that we've discovered while going through the database. Normally what they would do is you program in what you want the minimum charge to be. Some communities, they use the overall average of the entire community for a minimum charge when you're in the winter months and somebody's not here for 5 months. Say they put in 5.6 units of sewage, and that 5.6 is the maximum that they will pay as they go into the year until they can establish another average that's within the winter period. We don't know exactly how many people we have that are true snowbirds because a lot of these homes are vacant, and I think if we looked at the database now, it would show us total different figures. But even beyond that, and I talked with Lynn. Lynn has a lot of experience on when they implemented the water program up at her last duty station. Within Munis, there also is a module for putting in a tiered water system. And, I think at the close of our last meeting, we were starting to circle the wagon and say, likely the overall best approach that we can do is to go ahead and push forward with winter averaging, but also come back with a tiered water system. Apply that so that possibly it offsets, for the very low user that may get an increase in sewage, that we take the water rate back to that customer and the next tier up maybe pay more. That's what Lynn and them did in Northampton, and it's all of these provisions are nested within the Munis system right now, which we did not know for the last 2 months since we've been working on it. In further discussion with Lynn, I actually talked with Lynn today, and her basic recommendation is at this point, there's an old expression, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. Mark and I have studied this thing for 2.5 months. We've likely put more work into this than any consultant on the face of the earth will ever put in it. But it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. So it's very, very likely for full acceptance of this to be taken for our community that we have to now divert off and go ahead and find an independent consultant that would take a look at everything, including what Munis has right now, present them with a whole new scenario and say, look, we want winter averaging, and we also want a tiered water rate, and we want you to tell us the impact it's going to have on our community as opposed to what we're doing now. And that would be their target to zero in on this. I believe Lynn said that she had even presented us with the scope of services earlier in the year, which I forgot about, to be able to go out and get these type of services. So I guess I'm leaning in that direction myself now because I understand the reluctance of some of the board members as well as there will be reluctance within the community to accept the work that Mark and I have done independently, because they may feel that we had an inside angle and we were doing something for our benefit, which we're not. And it's these times that sometimes you have to get a third party.
Okay, and Mark Strange would like to comment.
So thank you for saying that, Richard. So I agree with everything you just said. So I agree with that. You know, a 5-month winter averaging is probably a good place to be. I also support tiering the rates, and then some sort of either minimum charge or flat rate for the zero winter people. And then if that can come from a third party source, I think that's where I am on this.
Okay, Mark Gold, yeah.
I don't want to short circuit Richard's comments, but if we're headed toward winter average with a minimum with no zeros, and if you recall, that was my original objection to winter average, was that there'd be zeros in there. What you're seeing is that I still thought winter maximum was better, represented what people had in towns, but if we went to a winter average system, that had no zeros in there, it could work. We could actually make it work. And I think that takes the sewer system separate from where the water is. I mean, what I don't want to end up is we say to the people who are irrigating their lawn, look, we're going to save you $200 on your sewer bill because we're going to go to this winter average system. But by the way, we're going to charge you $300 more for your water because we've gone to a tiered water system. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I think one should have be somewhat separate from the other. And having again looked at these bills, we can tier the water, but I think what we really want to look at is those very, very high people. If you remember that one one graph I showed you is, there's about 80 or 100 residents in town who are using just that very high tail in the water. And it seems to me that those are the people we ought to be going after right away in terms of excess water use. And, from where I was, it was somewhere in the, 300 or 400 unit water. I mean, 400 units of water is just a ridiculous amount of water when you think about it. And we have people who are using 600 and 700 and 800 units. So from my perspective, it was, let's look at a winter 5-month winter system. If it's an average, it's an average, but we got to create a minimum, or certainly get rid of the zeros. I prefer the minimum to getting rid of the zeros, and then put in a tiered system, but start with the very, very high tier. Over a period of years, as we see what's going on, we can work down, but we're not going to set tiers at 100 units, 200 units, 300 units today. It's just not going to happen.
Thank you, Mark. I did want to comment on Richard's comment, because I know when I've done research, there's been times where I have a data set that's perfect, and then there's one missing number. And you think, I'm going to have to take this subject and pull them out of the study unless I could fill that spot. And so you're allowed to report that I put an average in there. I put an average number and put it in, and that probably is not going to upset the total. And so what you're suggesting, Richard, is that for folks who have zeros, we just say, hey, here's the average, and boom, we're just going to plug that in, and that's what we're going to use as your winter average. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I would support that. I don't know if we need to, I mean, I would go ahead and vote on doing something like that for winter average and deal with the sewer now instead of getting a report. But if we extend it, then we could deal with water usage also. And I know there are folks in town who are interested in making sure that we conserve water. But as Mark Gold was explaining, people who are using a lot of water, I think of people in town who I know were making $20 million a year. And if they want to have a green garden, they can afford to buy the water, and limiting their water use probably is not going to happen. So we can tell
That,
them.
that's true, Tom. That's
Yeah.
true, Tom. Is there a possibility that we could, I know Lynn's not been primed for this, but could we ask the town manager, Lynn, do you have any feelings on this? I mean, you're having to deal with it internally also. You're going to have to deal with this. Do you have any feelings?
After hearing all of this, over the last few meetings, I think I still rest I know I still rest with where I was back in February I'd rather take a holistic look at both water and sewer rates and how we're handling the billing module, and make adjustments to the whole system as opposed to just one tiny piece of it. I think we need a better understanding on how one change in sewer may impact lower end users and who those lower end users are and what the impact can be. I think we also need to provide a tool for them to figure out for themselves some of these changes we're talking about, what it's going to do to their budget at home. I'm concerned that lower end users are going to be absorbing more of this than we know of at the moment.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn. So any other comments or questions? Mark or Steve Morantz.
Yes, if Munis will handle 5 months as a winter averaging, it doesn't have to be 4 or 6. I think that's really good. I think the tiered system, I hear what Mark Gold is saying, and the tiers, but I also think the person who doesn't use a whole lot of water. I mean, the tiers can be pretty broad. You can have a tier, the first tier could be pretty small and pretty cheap. And as you get up, and then you have a giant middle tier, which might cover most of the population, and you have you have a tier for the people using 800 units or 600 units, a quarter. So I think the tiers is more. I think that's all fungible and doable to make it work. So you're not, it doesn't have to be every 10 units. It can. I assume we can make the tiers anything we want to. So I think we can, so we get the high end users and help the low end users. I think that's a very doable possibility. I do think though we want to have something proposed and ready to go, because if town meeting, to me, the worst alternative that we can have happen is town meeting vote second meters in and people start putting them in. That's gonna be the least fair to, I think, the most amount of citizens in the town. Unless we start changing, unless we do it again with water rates. But I think that, I would hope we could cut that off at the pass by doing something beforehand. I get what Lynn is saying. It'd be really nice to have the whole package analyzed, but this package has been analyzed, 10 times in the last 20 years. Maybe piecemeal analysis and let's getting the ball rolling with something like winter averaging. I think this is the town average, folks. If you're not here in the winter, this is your average. I think that's livable. I think that's acceptable, as long as we don't have any zeros in there. So I think those outlines with a tiered water rate system that it makes sense. So when the really big users do pay more, but the low user doesn't get hammered. The middle user just basically is, it's fair as we can make it. That makes the most sense to me. But I think we ought to at least put something out there saying this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to do it by. I think that would help the community.
Okay, well that's good. So what are we going to do? We're going
to. Tom, I'd like to remind everybody Mark and I have not looked at the water only as just amount of usage. We were 100% looking at sewage. We've not applied any time to experimenting around with the databases for a tiered rate. Primarily, I guess, guys, we're finding out now that if you're sitting down at a computer and you work in Munis, you can set up a test module and that you can plug in all the hypothetical information that we've discussed for the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, I even told Mark he should be in love with the system because it even allows him to do winter max. It allows you to set up any scenarios you want. It's unlimited. But we haven't looked, Steve, we haven't looked at that water aspect yet. It's my anticipation, and I think it is with Mark's too, that if we look at the low end user, and we can say they're snowbirds, or we can say that they're our seniors that are living here year round, they're still a very low user. That's the people that right off the top of the bat looks like there could be a negative impact on by the consequences of the rate structure. And that's where we thought that it would be applicable if we did the second tier look at this point on the tiered water rate, which would offset that. So that way, when you start to present, you're presenting a more holistic package for approval. Steve, I agree. They got they could pass the warrant articles for the second meters. I don't think they will. I believe there's been enough talk now, and there should be enough people that can stand up at town meeting to tell the people that this is not the direction you want to go. I mean, we pretty well demonstrated that to our research that it affects a very, very small percentage of our population, and it negatively affects the rest of the population if that's the only thing that happens. So I think we're at that cusp right now. Do we try to sell what we have, or do we push forward, even if it's through a third party, and finish up this work and come in with a holistic package for delivery? I tend to, Mark and I have talked a lot about it, I tend to agree a lot with Lynn that it may be time to put a holistic package together, because that way you're selling it and there's no, oops, I forgot, or these things that we find out when we get in. Because Mark and I have experienced this day after day after day when we ran into something we did not anticipate. And we had to go back and correct the database and review and see what took place in there. There's so many variables, and I think I just don't think we're ready to hatch 100% at this point.
Thank you, Richard. And Mark, go.
Yeah, just a final comment. I mean, I think we're headed toward a sewer system, billing system that's what I heard Steve Morantz said, Mark Strange to some degree is, 5-month winter average and get rid of the zeros by applying the town-wide average. I mean, that's what I see here as a consensus. Yes, people are going to potentially pay more, only because the rate will go up, not because their sewer usage will go down. Up the low end people are going to have low water volumes and low sewer volumes, but the overall sewer volume is going to go down. We calculate it by money to be raised divided by this volume, so the rate will go up. I think the rate's going to go up 25 or 30%, probably. We've got a sewer retained earnings fund that's pretty healthy right now. And, we have the luxury of going a year to see what happens with just taking the rates up a little bit, in anticipation of what's going on. When you're paying $30 for sewer and your rates go up 25%, that's why I did the calculation of how many bills are going to go up by more than $20. It goes up and it's a high percentage, but it's a low number of dollars because it's so low. And if we I was going to say sneak up on it, recognizing that we need to use the sewer retained earnings fund to see where we are the first year. I think that'll A, give us a chance to see where we're going, B, give people a chance to get used to what's going on with these bills. And, if we simultaneously move to what everybody's talked about as quarterly billing, that may also ease the burden a little bit. Again, when it comes to water, it's another look at it, because you can sell your incremental water at literally below what it costs you, or you can sell your incremental water at what you want to do is to force conservation and anything in between. But water's a whole different story.
Okay. So we really have to make a decision about, do we feel the more responsible thing for us to do as a board is to vote on a plan so that when we go into the town meeting, people will say no to the meters, or do we think it's a better decision to perhaps bring in a consultant and look at water and sewer together. And so what are we gonna do? Steve Morantz.
Well, I certainly think we should look at water and sewer together at some point in time. But a couple comments. One is, whatever we do is not, it's not in stone. I mean, you know, as we can change what we do. It's not like, you know, we're setting these rates forever and there we go. But Lynn, let me ask you a question in terms of where do you think we might end up with a consultant's look? Is where you went up and where you were, did winter averaging become, sound like what Richard said, it was winter averaging plus some sort of tiered water system. Is that where you ended up?
No winter averaging, but yes, a tiered water system.
What did you do for sewer in terms of sewer usage? How did you determine?
The same. It was tiered based on meter size. Let me remember. Hold on one second. Non-metered and metered sewer was charged different rates. No, I'm sorry. Non-metered and metered were charged the same rates. The way that it breaks out there is 80% of your water use is what is determined for your sewer usage. So there's a 20% give.
Okay, thank you.
It's really like a 220 cap, but it's a variable cap. It's 80% of what you use.
And it's the other way around too.
What do you mean by the other? I don't know.
Because it is directly tied to your water usage. So if you use say 400 units of water, you're going to get charged 80% of that. There's no cap.
Right, for water and for sewer. For sewer, right.
Right, there's no cap.
So that approach in town doesn't address the issue raised by the irrigation people, that I'm using a lot of water and it's not going down the sewer and I'm paying sewer fees for it. Well, all we can say is, yeah, well, you're only paying 80% of the sewer fees for it. Or maybe you're not paying any sewer fees on that at all. I mean, because right now our system is more forgiving than that, because, you know, if you're using, 400 units of water, you're only paying 220. It's a much better than an 80% break. You're only paying for 55% of the sewer rates on only 55% of your water.
Okay, yeah, that's a whole other argument and road to go down. I don't think we want to get caught on that road, but we have to look at the fact that if the town votes that people can put in their own meters, that's permanent. So, Stephen, you're right. We can make adjustments as a board to what we decide to do, but when the town votes in those meters, then that's a permanent. And those folks are saying, this is the way we're going to do business with the town. So that's why we have to decide what are we going to do tonight, or what are we going to do? Because if we do a report, it may take until September until we have an idea about doing a combined tiered system. Mark.
The town, are we afraid to make a motion to start the ball rolling on a different sewer billing system? Is that it?
I don't think there's fear. I think we're just getting.
Oh, yeah. You want me to make a motion? I'll make the motion. The problem is it's a complicated system, but the motion is that we implement a 5-month winter average with 0 months set as the townwide water use average, and that will be the minimum sewer bill use throughout the year.
Okay.
It'd be your maximum sewer use throughout the year. If you actually use less, you'll charge less. That would be your maximum sewer bill usage throughout the year.
Right. Because anything over that is used for watering. Do I get a second on that motion? I'll second the motion. So we got a motion on the table. We can discuss it a little more. Yep.
I would, an amendment to the motion, to add to the motion. I think that we do want to take a look at water rates, and that needs to be part of what, I don't know, it's part of the motion, but if, you know, if we don't look at water rates and just say, this is what your sewer bill is gonna be, and the water rates are gonna be whatever, you know, Paul comes up with for the numbers that fit the enterprise stuff. I'm not sure that's where we want to be. I think I think, you know, I think at this point in terms of how we want to do sewage with the 5 months winter averaging, I can live with that. I think getting rid of the zeros, I can live with that. It's just that at some point we need to address water usage, and if we're not, you know, as long as if we commit to that, whether it's by motion or however, then I can go along with the 5 month winter averaging tonight.
Okay. Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, so I think I agree with Steve. So, you know, not to repeat myself again, you know, but I can support the 5 month winter averaging with some sort of flat fee or minimum charge for the quote unquote snowbirds. But we have to look at the water simultaneously. I don't see how we not look at the water. I've always kind of assumed that. Now, you know, I hear Lynn and others talking about a holistic approach. I never thought that we could change the sewer without also making simultaneous changes to the water, for a variety of reasons, the least of which is, you know, you know, whatever changes we make, the lowest users are going to get, their bills are going to go up. That concerns me, but, you know, I do understand that we do need to make a change, so it's more equitable, more of a straight user fee than we have now. Having said that, you know, there's the people that are, you know, there's a handful, you know, relatively speaking, there's a handful of people in town who use a lot of water to water their lawns, and they're better positioned to pay for that water. So, so yeah, I mean, and again, you know, going back to what Lynn and Richard said, you know, I think this has more credibility coming from, even if it's a limited scope collaboration or collaboration is the wrong word. A limited scope study that says, you know, this is what we're looking at. This is what the impacts will be for, you know, the lowest 10% users. This is what the impact will be for the highest 10% users. You know, when we look at 5 month winter averaging for the sewers, and then whatever the tiered options are for the water. So I don't know that I'm ready to commit tonight to what Mark's motion was.
Okay, but if we took Mark's motion and then added on to it, like it sounds like you and Steve are on the same page, saying that the select board in the future would do research on a tiered water system, tiered water billing system. Would that, if we added that to the motion, would that meet your needs?
I mean, if it's, you know, I don't want it to be ambiguous. You know, it's, when we change the sewer approach, we need to also simultaneously change the water approach. So if that's what you're saying, then yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Well, so that's holding everything up. I mean, we can't change the sewer rate until we do the entire study then. So
I don't know how you can change, you know, how you can do one without the other. I guess I'm just having my come to Jesus moment tonight on that. But I always assumed, you know, you can't change the sewer without also changing the water.
Why do you think that? Is it because of equity? Is it because of...
Yeah. Oh yeah, equity. Yeah, equity.
All right.
Yeah.
That's allowable. Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so so I guess so there's really nothing. Can we make an amendment to the motion, or is Mark's motion going to go forward as is, or because if we...
I would have no clue how to amend the motion to reflect a tiered waters rate.
No, because otherwise you'd have to wait until you got a report back in, you know, between now and September.
Well, you know, I've given my opinion, but the motion's been seconded, so we can have a vote. I mean, you know, I don't know how other people are going to vote. You know, if it doesn't pass, you know, or passes, and you know, that's democracy.
All right.
Well, I think there's another thing, Tom, that, you know, we got to look at. this hasn't been applied to Munis yet. We know we can do it, but we haven't done the test module on Munis. And you can also do the tiered water rate test module in Munis. So are we saying that we mandatorily are going to change this thing as of this vote, or are we saying that we're going to move forward now and do a test module in Munis and see what happens with this outcome, so we can come back to the board with a more holistic? I mean, we're still making progress. And I'll be honest with you guys, there's no way that you can stop a citizen's petition. If somebody wants to pass it, they can pass it. I've not been concerned about that since day one, because Mark and I have been working on it and the board's been being informed. We're giving this thing due diligence. We're giving this thing everything that the select board is responsible to do for our community. We've likely given a lot more than anybody's ever given on it. So, and we're so close to the finish, and I'd hate to say us goof it up now, and I agree with everything Mark said. We're set. We can roll. We've looked at the stats enough to know that what we're telling you is likely the most legitimate thing to do with the sewage. But we haven't looked at the water part yet. And that can be so easily done, it sounds like, if we got a test module going in Munis. But to do that, we have to lean back against the town manager and her staff to be able to do a test module. It's not available to Mark and I to play around with out here. It's only available on the town computers, and they would have full access. So it definitely is going to need the coordination, Tom, and you know, kind of the blessings of the town manager to have this time element put in. I mean, that's how I'm reading it. And you know, anybody else, including Lynn, just jump in, because this is a pretty important decision that we're making.
Well, I would say that, you know, it sounds like the board is pretty much in agreement that we have a motion on the table, but the next step is going to be to look into a tiered water system. And if we have a Munis system on, you know, access to their data, and we can begin to test those things, I think that we could very quickly come up with a solution to that tiered water. But you know, but we have to, if we make a decision, it has to be something that, you know, when we go to town meeting, say, the board has made this decision regarding sewer. It's not like, well, they're pretending to make a decision. It's like we're actually making the decision that this is how we're going to go forward. We make adjustments somewhere down the road, but this is where we're going to go. And so, you know, this is how the town, you know, you know, when we look at a developing policy, we think this is the best policy versus people getting their own meters. That's just my opinion. Mark Strange.
So, you know, I feel like, you know, if we vote to look at the tiered water system at some, you know, undefined point in the future, you know, that's good for tonight, but we get so busy and so many things come up, you know, we've seen it all the time. I think we've all been in government long enough that these things, you know, kind of get thrown on the back burner. And if you're at town meeting and, you know, you have people who may not be trusting, you know, the process or our ability to get back to that, when they have an warrant article that they can vote on, that they know what the result's going to be. So you have, you know, a winter averaging for the sewer, but nothing yet for the water. There's a tangible solution to that, and that's the vote for a secondary meter. You know, without the members of town meeting knowing what the impact of that was going to be. I don't know, you know, I can see that happening.
Mark, I could argue that they don't know what the impact would be of the secondary meter, because people who think they benefit from it will spend, pick a number, $850, $1,000 to install a secondary meter, and then they see their rates go up. So people just don't know. You know, they may vote on it, they may vote for it, you're right. But people should not assume that, well, I got a big sewer bill, secondary meter will benefit me. It may not.
So if the secondary meters pass, would we then still be able to go look at a tiered system? Or would that
I think it would behoove us to do that. And
Yeah.
at some point you can have a secondary meter system pass, but it wouldn't pay for anybody to do it. If we went to a tiered water system with the winter average sewer system, why would you spend $1,000 when you can get the same benefits are greater by not, remember, if you put in a secondary meter, you don't have any minimum, any caps, right? So you're going to pay a lot potentially. So you pass the second meter, that's fine, but you install it at your own risk. Town's not going to give you any guarantees that it'll save you money.
Okay. We ready to call the question?
I have a question. Lynn, if what Richard said, which is, can you run a couple tests, with both sewer and water with the Munis system? Is that doable in a short period of time, or prior to town meeting, or not? I don't really know what's involved.
I think Paul can jump in too, but I think the test would have to be in Excel. Munis can create a test environment, so when we know what we want to deploy, we can get our staff familiar with how to use it in a test environment, so they're not playing with live data. Paul, I don't know if I'm incorrect there, if you have something to add.
Well, again, there is what are known as training modules in Munis that takes a snapshot of where everything is today and just puts it aside from what actually goes into the system. So I think there is some opportunity to do some testing, and I'm not quite sure if it goes into Excel or not, but there is an opportunity to do some testing. My concerns or my questions would be, I just don't know how long it's going to take to set up for the water and sewer staff to set that up in the Munis system would be number one. And then I would comment that if we wanted to do the holistic approach, there's been a proposal for the 5-month winter averaging. We would obviously try to get that set up ASAP, but we would also need some guidance on where the tiers might be if we're talking the water tiered rate. So we could initially, I guess, if that direction was given, that we could come back to you folks in 2 weeks and basically identify where we are and what the numbers might look like if at all possible. But it would give you a better idea. I don't know if there's any hurry to come to a conclusion on long-term fixes here. But I think if we had that approach, and like I said, give the DPW 2 weeks to try to put something together, that will at least give you an update of where we are, what needs to be done. Do we need another 2 weeks? We would still be before town meeting. We have well over 5 weeks before town meeting. I think that might be an approach that I would recommend, kind of just holding off a permanent fix and let us do some trial and error stuff.
Okay, given that, Mark, yes, do you want to hold
table? Yeah, Paul, I support that. If need be, I'll move to table the motion. But the bigger question for me is, and this is for Steve and primarily, but also Mark Strange a little bit, is what are you looking for from this test? There's 5,441 different, accounts that we came up with. And, it's the averages don't tell you anything to say, well, on average, they go up this much, or, you really have to do the kind of analysis we did on sewers, looking at, them in smaller segments of the people who are the small water users or the middle water, because without knowing what we're looking for, Munis it'll spit out a bill for 5,441 different people. They'll say, here's your bill under the current system, and here's your new water bill and your new sewer bill. That's great. How are we going to evaluate that when we get literally 5,400 times 3 different data numbers of prices? That's my problem. And I want Munis to try the test. I just don't know how we want to evaluate it. That's why we spent so much time looking at these, and I took 1/20th slices to try to look at it. We should probably do the same thing. And we did it in Excel. And if Lynn is saying or Paul's saying it's Excel, do the same thing. But again, I'm happy to try doing it for you. And I'm sure Pete Thurber's happy to try doing it. But, like anything else, we're going to have to come up with a whole bunch of potential tier systems.
I think we might have to try a couple different tiered systems, as you say. And then we would probably give you examples of people's consumptions at certain ranges. I don't want to say even range, that, maybe at 20 units, 50 units, 75, 120 units, just give you examples of what the results are at those consumption levels.
Just remind you, Paul, that when I did the work on the sewer, if you took somebody at 75 units or 110 units, there were maybe 40 people that used 110 units, and some people did great and some people did, even within that group of people, because if they use it all in the wintertime or they use it all in the summer, it was so different. I mean, that's why I'm concerned about, how do we look at the data we get? We're going to get data, and it'll be great data, but I think at some point we're going to take a big deep breath and swallow and say, here's what we're going to have to do, and see how many people actually come back and yell and scream. And there will be people, no matter what you do, people will yell and scream, because for everybody whose water rate goes up, there's at least one, or down, there's at least one person whose rate goes up. It's probably more than one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we do this for 2 weeks of testing, we're going to get a big pile of data that we're going to have to sort of sort through, and we can find ourselves kind of in the same position. Is that what you're trying to say, Mark? That we were not, we're going to see.
We'll find ourselves with data, but we don't necessarily know what the data means, and it won't be specific. We'll have a lot of average data, and we can base our decisions on average data, recognizing that within that pool of customers, and it may be 50 or 75 customers who all seem to have the same number, there's going to be 50 or 75 different outcomes for those people. On average, we'll know what they're doing, but individually, there'll be some very happy customers and some not happy customers at all. Rich, you looked at the data, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Rich.
No, I agree 100%, Mark. You can't tell until you look at the individual data.
Okay, so so Mark wants to table the motion. Is that if board?
Can I ask a question, Tom?
Yes, please.
Clarifying question. Just so this topic came up because there was discussion about a citizen petition back in the fall, and then the citizen petition came to fruition. It's on the warrant. Do we know if, and that citizen petition is to allow secondary meters. Do we know if what we're discussing tonight, winter averaging, is responsive to that petitioner's requests in a way that they don't want any action on their warrant article, on that citizen petition? Or are we going to then be looking at two scenarios for July 1st, a secondary meter and winter averaging?
I'd like to comment to say that I believe that if we implemented winter averaging, that petition would go away, because it would be not beneficial to the people who are proposing it.
Okay.
They propose something not beneficial to them.
I would agree with that. I think that a 5-month winter averaging would probably either take the motion, the petition out of, it would not be presented, would not be defended, or it will go down to the feet because it won't make any difference. And I think but I do think we can't really separate water from sewer at this stage of the game. And I think at least getting, and the data I don't think it's going to be bad data. It might not be the most useful data that we could get, but I think running a couple scenarios and seeing what 2 weeks brings us in terms of water possibilities with different tiers, I think it makes the most sense. We're moving ahead in this. It seems to me we're going to end up with a 5-month winter averaging. It depends what happens with the water bill, or anything happens with the water bill. But I think we ought to find out what that means.
Mark Strange.
I just want to make one last comment. So, I'm bumbling through a lot of this stuff, and I'm almost glad, because I feel like I represent a lot of the community. So I think, again, Richard and Mark, you guys have done an amazing job with all the information, but it's too much. It's too much for me to kind of, put together. I think it's got to be more saleable to the general public, so they understand the people whose rates are going to go up. They understand why and how. I've been as close to this as any kind of lay member of the community, and it's still really difficult to understand with all the different data points and different options.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I would just say that I don't think we're going to know anything different in 2 weeks. Again, we've had 2 members of the board do a lot of work on this, and I think we should vote tonight, but it's been tabled.
No, it hasn't. We haven't voted to table it. It's still there.
All right, you just said, but
I said I would, but I haven't.
Okay, he hasn't. Okay, so, but I just think we're not going to know much more in 2 weeks. And I think if, like Mark, you're concerned about, will we get to the water? Will it get on the agenda? Well, I think you might have a lot to do with it, because before you blink too many times, you could be the chair of this board. so you could put it on the agenda, and we could deal with it in the near future. I don't think it can get lost. But if we, I think we could vote on this. I agree. I don't think we're going to know that much more. Because we've done, not as a board, we've discussed it a lot, but the work that Richard and Mark have done, I think that I don't think we're going out on a limb voting on Mark's proposal. As long as we, follow up with the water side of it.
Did Mark's proposal have quarterly billing in it?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. We didn't mention that. So can we add that?
Motion did not, but we could add it as put it as a secondary motion, an additional motion.
Okay, so Steve, you want to make that as an amendment to the motion or a secondary motion that this would have
I would amend the motion to include quarterly billing.
Okay, amend the motion. Okay, and then second, anyone?
Second.
Okay, Richard seconded. Okay, so
Under discussion, Tom,
yes.
the one thing the board has not been briefed on is what the cost would be associated with that. I realize that may be a secondary part, but we still have not been briefed on the impact on the operational side of the house.
I don't know, Paul, you may have answered that question once. I thought you said there was not going to be significantly more. Am I wrong?
There's a couple things to look at. Obviously, when we're sending out over 10,000 new bills a year, there will be the price of running those bills, sending out postage and everything like that. And that minimally is going to be $10,000, shared 50-50 between water and sewer. You also have the administrative time that it's going to take. I do not have an estimate of how long it actually takes to get the billing done, but you'll have that administrative time of getting the bills out, and then also the collection process. There will be charges, additional fees, whether they use lockbox or not, or even if they come to town hall when town hall is open again and send that in, it still has to be processed. So I just don't have an estimate on the administrative fees, but minimally it's going to be $10,000 just to get the bills out in the mail.
Okay. So I guess we're looking at, first we would vote on the amendment to the motion, that it would be quarterly billing. There's no further discussion. We'll ask Michael Barbieri to do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay. And now the main motion, which is to use well, I don't know, Dave, Mike, can you read the motion? Do you have it written down? Mike Barbieri?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
No, I did not get a chance to take note on that.
Okay. So, yeah, but basically, Mark is saying that we would use a 5-month winter averaging to do sewer bills with an average for using an average figure in to fill in for people who had zero water use for any time period during winter. So we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
No.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster,
Yes.
Right. Well, thank you. There's a lot of work. Appreciate everybody's contributions to the discussion. And, I think it's a good decision. So good. Thank you. The next thing is we are going to talk about the select board policies and procedures that we had given out. And we had people who had made some additions to, and attached to our agenda is a document. And I guess, Lynn, I'm thinking do you want to, well, I could share it on my screen if you give me that ability.
Sure, you should have permission already.
Oh, okay. So, okay, share screen. All right. So here we are. And this is our rules and procedures. So the first one is the selection of officers and their roles. So do people think that'd be a good addition there, and the roles? I guess we could just vote these along as we look through it. I'm not sure. Yeah, well, okay, so I guess we may have to take a vote on something like this. So so I'd like a motion that we add on section 1, it says officer and their roles would be the first change to this document. I'd like a motion. Anyone second that motion?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. We'll do a roll call vote on this. Mike?
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster,
Yes.
Okay. Now the next section here, we talk about the chair, the vice chair, in the event that so in the event the outgoing chair is not present at the meeting or is no longer a board member, then the vice chair would open the meeting. The first order of business shall be asked for nominations for elected positions. The board membership subsequently, the newly elected chair shall be presiding officer for the remaining of the meeting. And this is.
So yeah, that's mine, Tom. So can I talk to that briefly?
Yeah, sure.
So, in Agawam, I know Agawam is a different form of government, but the first meeting that they have after elections is there's no business that's discussed, just a reorganization of the board. And they do that so that once the business does come before them, they're organized and ready to go. I think for us, we don't need to do that. We're smaller and we're a different form of government. But if we're gonna have elections at the beginning of the first meeting, we're gonna have our own elections after the first meeting after the town election. I think we should reorganize first thing on the agenda, and then whoever gets elected, the chair should run the meeting after that first order of business.
Okay, and is there anybody who thinks that this is drastically different than the way we've been doing it? I don't think it is. So I guess I'll make a motion that we accept this change as proposed.
Hey, Tom, instead of having motions and votes on every paragraph, how about if we go through this whole section and do a section at a time? If we got to do roll call votes on every sentence, we'll be here till a week from Tuesday.
Maybe, maybe not. Okay, let's see if we can get through this. And the next section is the chair shall have the following responsibilities: develop the agenda, work of town manager, and the aide, presiding officer, select board meetings. Right, and so public was scratched. So because every meeting we do have some that are executive sessions, and then to decide points of procedure. And which was scratched is unless overruled by the majority of the board in a session at the time. So basically the chair could not be overruled is what this is saying. Anyone want to comment on this? Mark Gold.
I'm just going to comment on paragraph C. I'm okay with A and B, but my comments in paragraph C were there that I don't have a problem with us having no vice chair, but if we don't have a clerk, it has legal ramifications. So I know, Mark Strange, you said that if there's a vice chair vacancy, the clerk shall be elevated. I think we should strike that and just leave no vice chair for the remainder of the session, because without a clerk, we could be in more trouble than without a vice chair.
Yeah, that's fine. So if by some chance we do get into that situation and the chair with no vice chair couldn't go to a meeting, then the clerk who would run the meeting.
That's fine, but I don't, we could flip a coin who runs the meeting.
Yeah.
Number of times that's going to happen. I just don't think we should be elevating the clerk. That we need somebody who can sign documents. That's all.
That's fine.
I was going to say, couldn't you actually
so Tom, what that means?
Sorry, I was just going to add, couldn't you just simply vote in a new vice chair from the two remaining members?
That'd be
you being all reasonable.
I guess you might have to vote in a new clerk first, and then a new vice chair or chair.
I just strike in paragraph C, the part in purple, and then the red below it should just be stricken, Tom.
Okay, so you're saying that we take this and just, I can't edit it, but so this section here, you'd say we would take that out, right?
I think Paul's comments are valid. If we don't speak to it, that means the board can fill the vice chair if they want to. I don't think you need to put how it's filled. That's all.
Okay. So then we could take a vote on this first section, and the only major change to this is going to be that last 5 lines of paragraph C. So I'll make a motion, we accept this without those 5 lines. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move down here. And this is just as an attachment to the open meeting laws, but so we'll add that. That's an addition. And then special meetings called by the chair, and then the special meeting should be called as a result of a petition signed by a majority of the select board members. The petition must state the topic to be covered in the meeting. So, does anyone have any questions on that change?
I thought it used to be that anybody could call a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Mark,
majority of people.
Yeah, but anybody can request a special meeting, though. I don't think it has to be a petition.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it makes any difference. You know, petition actually is something you have to sign.
Yeah, I think that, you know, usually the chair respects the requests of members. You know, if they want to have a meeting or if they want to have something placed on the agenda, you know, that's generally what we try to do. So I guess this would just be if there was some special indication that the chair didn't want to do that, then they'd feel like there should be a petition by a majority of members. Yeah. Because
Right,
they're
that was the
Okay, well, I get.
Huh?
What's that, Mark?
That was the intent, was that if a majority of the people want to call a meeting and the chair doesn't, they can force the meeting to be called.
So this is a nasty chair amendment then?
That's exactly what it is, Richard.
Oh, okay, I'll second that.
Okay. No, it makes sense. I feel I have no problem with that. Because the chair does not run the select board. That's for sure.
Does it have to be a written petition? Is that what that means?
Steve, my thought
Yeah,
when I wrote this, that if we're in the nasty chair situation, yeah, it ought to be written.
And signed. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Maybe we should put in parentheses, nasty chair amendment, you know.
that's it. And then the as being the current chair, I'd say it has to be signed in blood. No, we won't go there.
Just
So
keep going.
so let's vote on this, making this
Well, you skipped the section up there.
just click that.
F. Move up, up. Yeah, there.
We voted that.
No, but you skipped F. Time of meetings.
Huh?
Keep going down.
This is down. This is special meetings.
Yeah. We're going to do all of this section.
Okay, all right. So time of meetings, 7, unless mutually agreed on by members of the board. Should be started at 11 p.m. adjournment. No, that's a good idea. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, all right.
No.
And then we go down to section 5. The board may ask an item be added to the agenda for discussion and not for vote by making such request during select board comments at the beginning of the meeting as the agenda if agreed to by the majority of the select board. And then there's a question, does this comply with open meeting law?
So the bottom of every agenda says the agenda is based on the best knowledge of the chair at the time the agenda was made. Obviously, this is intended to be something unusual rather than standard, but clearly it's a discussion and not a vote. So, you know, my understanding is does comply with open meeting law, and it doesn't say that it will be added to the agenda. It says the board may ask that it be added. It will be only added to the agenda if agreed to by a majority of the board.
Okay, and so you think about some situation that could happen. You know, the board, the agenda is published, it's distributed, and then something happens on that Monday, and they say, you know, well, we got to talk about this, and you know, this can make sure that those things get discussed in the open meeting. It makes sense to me. I don't know if anyone else has any concerns about it.
I have a question. Could a vote ever been taken? Could a vote be taken on such an item that's brought for discussion at that time? Because this says
That's probably counter to open meeting law, Steve. To take a vote on something that wasn't on the published agenda is probably not allowed by open meeting law.
So then,
I mean, unless it's emergency or something like that, normally that's not allowed.
okay. So we're just voting on if it could be put on the agenda. And that's okay? We're not gonna vote on the issue. We're gonna vote on it being on the agenda.
Right.
And did we have any feedback about this, how complying with the open meeting law?
I thought you answered that, Tom, that it complies because it was unintended,
All right,
unanticipated.
all right, so this basically this last section would not be there. We'd strike this.
Right.
Okay. All right. And so this is all part of section 2. So do we have a motion to accept the adjustments to section 2?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, you want to do a roll call vote first, Michael?
Musa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Okay. I'm doing okay, but I think I heard someone cheering for Gonzaga, but I don't have the game on. Okay. So we have our basically our standard agenda that we've been using for a long time.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Is there a reason why minutes of the last meeting are so late in the agenda as to number 10, as opposed to why shouldn't that be really early? I mean, it just
But it's usually under old business. That's my understanding.
Minutes should, yeah, that's one of the things you want to take care of really quickly, but you know, that's my opinion.
Yeah, we just haven't done them that way, but I don't know if anyone else has any concerns about that. All right, so the next thing is on B, agenda items submitted from a member that basically should be in writing to the chair, stating the subject matter, concise statement of the essence of the matter. Items requested by a member of the select board shall be included in the agenda in one of the next 2 meetings to the extent the time allows. And then this other was striked off about the item on 72 hours of request. Okay. And so comments on this? Are people satisfied with what's written in red versus the purple?
Just go with what's in the red, Tom. That's
okay. Well, I don't know who wrote the purple and if they needed comments. Okay. And then
that was me. I'm happy to comment if you want to. I just to put an hour, you know, a time limit on the chair. I don't know, things happen. So,
Mark, I think I wrote what was in purple, and then you said we shouldn't have it. I think.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with crossing it out. I was the one who originally wrote that, Tom.
Oh, okay.
And we shouldn't have it. That was his comment.
All right, good. And then the other thing, requested by a select board member at a public meeting may be placed on the second meeting agenda. And that's pretty standard. And we've done that. And so that sounds good. And then new items listed, new business or matters that have not been in front of the board during the current term. So that means like for the year, current term, is that considered a?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then another, written communications are signed or attributed to the sender that is directed to all members of the board should be included as correspondence. And the chair and the town manager may also include the distribution to other communications deemed to be important to addressed to town residents. So, so this is just to make sure there's no open meeting law violations. And then for some items placed on the agenda, the chair may want to consult with the town's legal counsel to safeguard the board from voting on a motion that is not concordant with board's usual practices or the mission.
The question is, do we want to have want or have? Should the board chair have to consult or just want to consult?
I guess it would be want for some items. Yeah, because there's probably more items that we don't have to consult with them, but there's some where we may want to consult because we wouldn't know if we have to. I mean, the chair may not know if they have to, but then the council would, hey, yes, it's a good thing you brought that up. This is something you would have to run by us. Because we've run into that where we've had motions that, or, people want to make a motion that were really not legal. We couldn't entertain it. We shouldn't have been voting on it. So,
Tom, I think we should include the word chair because the select board shouldn't consult, the chair should. And
right.
And have may want to consult instead of may have to consult. So I'd include the word want and the word chair.
Okay, I agree with that. So we would have.
I have a question in terms of to be placed on the agenda as opposed to be voted on, because in my brief experience, we've had motions passed subject to town attorney approval or legal opinion, which would seem to solve the problem as opposed to it might not even be on the agenda because I'm not quite sure why we couldn't put something on unless it's not for unless it's for executive session. I'm not quite sure about placing something on the agenda that would be. I'm not sure what that would mean, as opposed to having a motion subject to a legal opinion, which we do.
Tom, it was your paragraph, so what were you intending?
Yeah, I was intending that there are, it doesn't make sense to have an item come up that then we vote on, and then later they say, well, you shouldn't have voted on it. You can't do this anyways. As a board, you can't. Like like sending a letter out or something like that. And I thought that this would say that, before we even put the item on the agenda, we could make sure that we're not wasting the town or wasting time in a meeting with something that we shouldn't be signing or something, right? So, yeah, I have no problem with the corrections, chair and want. So, and okay. And that's it for this section 3. So this is red. Change the select board in public meeting. H and I. Do we have a motion to accept those amendments? This whole section of the.
So moved.
Okay. A second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Procedures during the meeting. Procedures during the meeting shall be governed by a version of Robert's Rules of Order. It's modified by these procedures. Other than resident comments, no person shall address a public meeting of the board without prior permission of the chair or designated presiding officer. Okay, understand where that's come from.
I have a question about just the wording of prior permission. Prior means given right before the person wants to speak. That's what that means, as opposed to I want to speak, I've got to talk to somebody ahead of time. That's
right.
A real definition of prior means I raise my hand. That gets me prior permission.
Well, I think that I think it makes sense. Like if there is, if we're discussing some issue and there's several people in the audience who should be involved in that discussion, that we should, prior to the discussion, we should say, these two individuals or three individuals are going to be able to speak to this issue. And this, you know, if the fourth person is not on there, then they would have to get some approval. You know, and perhaps, you know, so I think that's what's behind this. I don't know. I guess it would just, I would think it would be part of the agenda process. You know, as you plan your agenda, that you would see exactly who's going to be speaking for this agenda item. Does that make sense, Steve?
I would just take out the word prior. I mean, you know, if someone wants to speak, they've got to, the chair has to say it's okay to speak. And if too many people are speaking and, you know, then you say the discussion's cut off. I think prior, I'm not sure, the situation you actually described, I'm not sure I actually think that's such a great situation. If three people have been given permission to speak, someone has something to say, who actually knows something about it, but he hasn't been talked to you about it ahead of time, talk to the chair about it ahead of time, and while you can't speak, that's, I mean, the effect would be the same if that person raises their hand and chair says, well, the discussion's over. You know, it has the same effect. But the person could speak if the chair so deems. So to me, I would take prior. I don't think it adds anything to
okay.
Chair's powers.
Any other people have a comment on that?
It seems, I mean, I think it's harmless, but it does seem redundant.
Okay, so we can strike this prior. All right, and then limited residence comments to 60 minutes, 3 minutes speaking time. So select board members are generally free to make their comments in ordinary order. No obligation to make a comment should the chair choose to assign an order to the comments. Then each meeting, until the end of the term of chair, the order must be used, and the order of members making comments must rotate from meeting to meeting. Each select board member is limited to 5 minutes of speaking time. And this was just, again, if we had a chair who was, you know, trying to take control of things, that, you know, if there is an order that they say, well, this is the order, then for making public comments, that then they should stick to that order, but they should rotate it. So they can't really sort of set up who speaks first, second, third, you know, to sort of influence a meeting. So, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to have a set order, but.
Tom, did you write this?
Yes.
Okay, well, what is the genesis of it? What are we trying to solve?
It's just basically, it was about comments, and that, you know, people generally there are no obligation to make a comment, and there shouldn't be an assigned order to comments. And I don't know, I guess I was looking at something made me think that someone might assign an order, but if they did, that it could be problematic.
Well, I'm confused on reading this. It says, should the chair choose to assign an order to the comments given in each meeting until the end of their term as chair, an order must be used, and the order of members making comments must rotate from meeting to meeting. Those two statements don't go together.
Well, let me explain it. So let's say I decide that I want, for resident comments, I always want to start out with Richard Foster, because I know Richard Foster is going to set things up the way I want as chair. So if I set up an order like that and say, I want to, okay, resident comments, and I call people's names, especially on Zoom, I'm making an order, and that can have an undue influence on the board and on the public. And so if someone started to do that, this rule would say it has to rotate. If it's Richard Foster one week, next week it has to start with Mark Gold, Mark Strange, Steve Morantz. That the chair can't really control select board comments. Does that make it clear?
I know what you said. I don't know if it's ever been a problem. I don't know what we're trying to cure. Is this a solution looking for a problem? I mean, Mark, anybody else, chime in. I'm just quizzy by it. It seems like I still know the basis for it, Tom. That's my only problem. I can't understand it.
Yeah. Well, it's never happened, but I think with Zoom specifically, this kind of a statement could be helpful because the chair has a lot more control, can have a lot more control in a Zoom meeting. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe, obviously, I'm the only one that thinks it's odd. So
I mean, Richard, if you have a problem with it, I don't see it's an issue right now. I would leave it out, but I thought somebody...
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. I don't know what the issue is. I understand, Tom, what you're saying about Zoom. That's a new environment that we have.
Yeah.
Our problem is usually not getting people to talk too much; is to talk too little.
Right. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll. All right.
I think we should limit the chair to only be able to talk 5 minutes too.
Yeah, that would be a much shorter agenda.
Yeah, I think it'd be a much smoother agenda.
Only get through old business and then we can move on. So the next one is the select board by majority vote table of a scheduled of the majority may table the scheduled vote on an agenda item if supporting materials of that agenda item were not included in the original distribution of the meeting packet. And so this is basically to give us a little more time to vote on issues if supporting materials weren't around. And, I don't know, anyone have any special feelings about that?
Yeah, I have the original paragraph and I'll accept Mark Strange's revisions to it and leave it the way it is right there.
Okay, great. So that way we're sure we have enough time to consider the issue. And then I would be votes of the select board. Accepted listed in the paragraph, the select board may adopt a certain majority of votes present voting. And then this is just about yes, favors the motion, no, opposes the adoption, present effective members of both present and voting, but does not count towards the support or opposition of the motion. And then D is an abstention, non-vote if the person wasn't present. And then it says at the bottom, a vote of present will be counted as an affirmative vote, which is different than what's stated here. So, right.
We have to decide what a vote of present means. I mean, the issue is that the board, although they've always acted this way, has never accepted the fact that, what it takes to pass an item is a majority vote of those present and voting,
right,
not a majority of the board. There are some boards, and I've checked with groups like Board Source and others, there's some boards that require a majority of the board. And if you have a board of 15 and only 6 people show up, there's nothing you don't have. But if you have a board of 15 and 9 people show up, you still need 8 votes to pass something. If you vote by a majority of the board, we have not done that. We have always been a majority of those present and voting. So that's what sentence 1 is. It establishes that adoption of things by the Long Meadow Select Board is based on a majority of people present and voting, not a majority of the numbers of people on the board. The second paragraph attempts to define what a vote is. And yes, no, present. Robert's Rules of Orders and definitions, if you look it up, an abstention is not a vote. An abstention means I abstain from voting. And that's what it said there. An abstention says you abstain from voting. So it's not a vote. You may be present, but you're not voting because you abstain. That's what an abstention is. But a vote of present was intended to be, I'm here, I'm voting, but I'm not voting for it. So my paragraph C and D was different from Mark Strange's comment that a vote of present is an affirmative vote. If somebody's going to vote affirmatively, then they need to vote yes.
So my only concern there is with a board of only 5, if you vote present, you're effectively you're voting no, right? I mean, if you vote present, you're effectively voting no without actually having to vote no.
Right, and so I basically, I don't think present should be a vote, because, correct me if I'm wrong, under this circumstance, 2 people vote present, 2 people vote yes, 1 person votes no. The motion, I believe, should pass because the majority of the people voting did it. According to this, it will not pass because 2 people voted present, so it's not the majority of the members. And therefore, that's a no vote. And if you're going to vote no, don't vote present. I don't think present should be an option. If you abstain, so if you have 2 to 1 with 2 abstentions, the motion should pass. Not 2 to 1, 2 presents, the motion fails. That makes no sense to me, and I don't think if you want to vote no, vote no. If you don't want to vote at all, and you say you want to abstain, and the motion passes or doesn't, but your vote doesn't make a difference. You vote present, your vote makes a difference. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, all my experience with boards, it's either yes, no, or abstain. I've never heard of any board using present. This is completely new to me.
Tom, according to Robert's Rules of Orders, you shouldn't even call for abstentions because that's not a vote. It's to say I vote to abstain is an oxymoron. If you abstain, you're not voting. You're abstaining from voting. So if the sense of this group is that we should have yes or no, then on line 2 we should just say select board members shall vote yes or no on each item considered for adoption. A vote of yes favors the adoption. A vote of no opposes the adoption, and then delete paragraph C.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. I do think, Mark, that we need to keep in your note about, so if you do have a conflict of interest, you have to leave the room or not participate at all.
That's not right. That's state law.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest, you're supposed to leave the room.
Right. So I don't know if we have to need to put it in there or not, but.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And okay, so in this section, we're looking at changing, this C into abstention. So we have yes, no, and abstain. So you have to just make a decision, yes or no. Right. And then again, a vote of abstain, just as in issues of conflict of interest. And so you recuse yourself from the voting of the action. And we've had that where people will actually, in some situations, they just leave the room because they can't, they want to be part of it. So that's good. I like that. And then so it talks about definition of abstain, definition of present.
I said back on that last back above D there, above D, that last sentence, vote of present. We're not having a vote of present. That last.
We're deleting that vote of present will be counted as an affirmative vote. That sentence is also being deleted.
This should be deleted also. That would be deleted. This top would be deleted. Delete this.
Yep.
And then down here, we could delete this present because there's no present. Right?
Yep.
And that is 1, 2, and then. So the third part of this is that affirmative vote of 4 of the 5 members of the board is required to finalize a job offer to a candidate to fill the position of town manager.
Do we need that since it's in the town charter?
I only included it, Steve, just to clarify that because we were talking about majority votes rule. just to clarify that the town charter overrules this document?
Okay. And then the majority of members of the select board and chair may implement an alternative method for approving the appointments of individual boards and committees.
Tom, that reflects, remember what you did when we had 4 people applying for 3 jobs and you said, okay, everybody rank them, or whatever it was you did. I thought that was an alternate system and it worked.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, so let's look at these, this section here that starts section 4.
Can I comment on 4.1 or 4A? You want to use the word latest version of Robert's rules?
Modified version.
I mean, you have modified version, but it sounds like you could pick any modified version at this point in time.
Okay.
No, I like modified.
Well, the latest modified version.
Well, that says whatever Robert rules is, we're going to be governed by. And we don't have to be. I modified, generally follow, but I don't want to be, I don't think we should be, whatever Robert rules says we have to do.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just, I guess it's, for me, it adds clarity, but it's your document.
Well, we can argue about that as the new edition of Robert Rules comes out. Luckily, I don't think they revise it very often.
Tom, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Barbieri, do you have a copy of this in Word that you're modifying as we go along? Because I have a Word version that I'm going along with on my other computer.
Yeah, I have both copies, a Word version.
Okay, so you're making the changes as we go.
I can make the changes, and I was also planning on watching the playback just to reiterate.
All right, thank you.
Don't mention playback while basketball games on. Let's move on. So we'll look at this section 4. We have a motion to accept all as written, or does anyone have any other? Well, I mean, other than the discussions we made to remove certain issues. So we get a motion for this section.
I move we approve section 4 as modified.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
No.
We have our public hearing procedures. And this is pretty much the way we do it.
Tom, for paragraph 6 there, I'd recommend we delete what's in blue and keep what's in green. If you scroll down.
Okay, at this point, no new documents or research materials presented by a member of the select board or town staff for consideration because the area cannot be reopened. Yeah, and that's the main thrust of this, is that it seems very unfair to presenters. You know, I mean, you have a presenter, you have a rebuttal, you have another presenter, and then you have a rebuttal of that, and like, and then that's the discussion is based on those presentations, and so no new documents should be introduced, and I think that's what you're saying here. No new documents or research material presented by a member of the board or staff because the hearing cannot be reopened. Okay, that seems to be same thing. I don't know if anyone else has a comment. And then compliance with the meeting record laws of the Commonwealth. Written record of the meeting becomes part of the public domain. Designated as draft, not verified. Review past executive session meetings. State's council released at some point in time. shall not be released unless authorized by a supermajority vote of the board or an issue of court of law. Okay. So this is section 6. Actually, we have section 5.
I'll move we approve sections 5 and 6 as written.
Okay. I'll second that. Okay, second, and then any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That section, I know it may not seem like a big deal to you guys, but I was at a meeting where this issue came up, where there was a presentation, and then all of a sudden, after it's over, someone made a recommendation that was really out of line. And it's nice to be in a position where I can say that that's not going to happen in our town. So thank you very much for your support on that. Suspension procedures. In a situation where the procedures are going to be suspended to entertain a motion not on the agenda, the board may have to consult the town's legal counsel to safeguard the board from voting on motions that are not concordant with the board's usual missions and practices. So this is
How does that happen practically? I mean, we're in the middle of a meeting and there want to be a vote to suspend, suspend a motion. We have to time out. We got to call the lawyer.
Procedures going to be suspended to entertain motion.
So this section 7, what the primary purpose is to allow the board, say you're, in a debate and you want to continue past 11 p.m., you could suspend that provision of your rule that allows your meeting to keep going. Or the same with if you have something that was introduced to you that night and it's critical that the board vote on it that first night, you could suspend that provision of the rule that requires you to have it take place in 2 meetings.
I buy that, Lynn. I just don't understand what's written in blue there.
Right. I agree.
I accept the first sentence, but I don't get the second sentence at all.
Well, I guess it's, first of all, if the issue is not on the, so we'd have a majority vote, but if it isn't on the agenda, I guess it doesn't give the public any chance to prepare or make any sort of comments on it. And we also don't know if town council would agree that we should take this vote on this motion. I guess that's, so maybe it's overkill.
I'm not sure it's overkill, Tom. The issue is, in the middle of a meeting, you can't check with town council. So it's not a practical procedure for select board meetings.
Well, it would mean that the issue would have to be, you would suspend it. So the procedures are going to suspend the entertainment of a motion until you consult town's council.
Yeah. I delete that sentence because I don't follow.
All right, I think I could. That doesn't bother me. We could take that out. Let's. We probably won't run into it. Reconsideration votes. We've had a few of these, and it's saying a supermajority vote is required to accept a reconsideration motion. This would also require the full board be present. Majority of the board must agree to renew and revoke any motion that has been defeated within the previous year. So, I want to say, we've had to do reconsideration votes. I can't remember. There was what the last one was.
Tom, we should just leave it in. I mean, if a majority of the people are going to agree to renew and revote, the majority of the people are going to probably vote to change it. So just leave that in.
Okay.
Right.
And then standard procedure. Oh, we're at the end already. So we just need to approve section
7 and 8.
7, 8,
Then
9.
we approve section 7 and 8.
How about 7, 8, 9, 10,
7, 8, 9, 10.
and 11 and 12?
Okay, it was amended, so we strike out this paragraph. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none. What is our vote? You want to do a roll call vote, Mike?
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
All right. So we are to the new business finally. And we need to appoint a board of registrar member. And so we have, here's the current, these are the folks who've been members of the board, the voting board, board of registrars. And my understanding, and Lynn, you just confirmed that Peter Bouvier is, his term expires on 3/31, and he is not seeking to be placed again, correct? He no longer wants to continue on the board?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't involved in the board member process here. So according to your memo, yes, the Republican chair was reached out several times and no response was received.
All right. So what we've done in the past, and we sort of got in trouble, is at one point we had, when a person, we sort of came to agreement on the board that if a person is off the board and they are not seeking to continue to the next term, then that seat becomes open, and we've been trying to get a balance, but we can't with 3 members. So we go over a period like this of having 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and then at this point we would look at trying to get a motion of a Democrat. So I'd like to make a motion to place Aaron Freed as the 3rd member of the Board of Registrars.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
Tom,
Yes.
I need Paul Pasturzik or Lynn to remind me of what's coming up on the town warrant and what we've done with the state in terms of the Board of Registrars and how we've messed it up over the last couple of years and how that's going to impact us.
Yeah, speaking of needing legal review. So that warrant article first was adopted to have a election commission as opposed to a board of registrars. And then it was rescinded at a follow-up town meeting once it was discovered that the original intent was not what adoption of the law was going to do. So that passed town meeting to be rescinded, and it was sent to the legislature to file a special a home rule petition for us to allow revocation of the acceptance of that state law. There's a 3-year window on it. So we needed a special act in order to rescind it under 3 years' time. That was submitted by Senator Lesser last January or December even. And it started to go through the committee process. And unfortunately, due to COVID, anything not COVID related fell by the wayside. And the special act needed to be resubmitted, which it was at the start of the new session in 2021. So it's still making its way back through the process, and we are still operating under the emergency provision from my conversation with the attorney for the elections division last June.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll continue with this process. Hopefully, everything in Boston will work out, so we will have a board of registrars. So any further discussion on the motion? Okay, move to roll call vote. Mike?
Mr. Lakusa,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
So look at approval of the meeting house, alterations of the premises, basically looking to use their temporary use of the patio. And this is the cap on seating capacity, looking for the permit to serve alcohol in their existing outside, similar to other towns or other restaurants in town. We have given this permission to, and it would not influence the hours of operation, correct?
Correct. It will not.
So this is identical to what you did last June. The governor had suspended some of the ABCC requirements to allow businesses to space out and offer outdoor seating. The meeting house does have an outdoor patio that's already established, but their liquor license does not cover service on that patio. Approval of this tonight under this emergency provision allows the service to start as soon as the select board adopts it and does not require state approval, which can take anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. I know that the meeting house intends to come forward at a later date to make this patio a permanent part of their premise, but that has not happened yet. And I do think we have a representative from the meeting house in the attendee list if you wanted to hear from them directly.
Yeah, Mark Gold.
Lynn, does this have an end date, or is, when we did it for the other restaurants, we put those tents up, wasn't there an end date to those? Or is it?
Yeah, there was. And then for this new spring season, I can't recall exactly what you all did in March for Pasto and Max Burger, whether it was through the summer or if it was just through the end of the state of emergency.
I believe the wording was 30 days after the state of emergency ends.
Right, that's what I recall. Yeah.
I'd like to add that wording to this.
Okay, so we would, if we had a motion, we would say that the motion is to approve alteration of premises for the meeting house to serve alcohol in their patio until 30 days after the state of emergency ends, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Next, we have a renew the seasonal liquor license for the Clubhouse Cafe. And so are all of the documents in order for them?
Yes, I have all their license renewal information in.
Okay. And was there an issue on taxes or some, was there?
Yes, so since the inception of the stormwater fee, the Clubhouse Cafe has never paid that. There is some conversation about a possible agreement that existed between the municipalities, since it's the city of Springfield that runs and owns the property there. The clubhouse itself is leased out to a private business. So there's some question on whether or not there was an agreement between the municipalities that this fee would not be paid. We're still investigating that. There's no recollection of that here, and no one has a copy of it. We have had legal counsel take a look at it as well. I don't have an answer back yet, but this is, I think, the third or fourth year that this license has been renewed with those fees outstanding. Just stormwater, not water sewer.
Right. And so, as we look at the issue of stormwater on a golf course, I think it's, they have the sort of I don't know how much of the water from the golf course actually ends up in our stormwater system, but they do have a large parking lot. And, but I don't know if it's actually in Springfield or in our town. But I guess I would think that, we should look into this. I'm not saying we should refuse the license, but I think that we should try to figure out at some point what's going to happen with that fee. I don't know what other people think. Mark Cole.
Yeah, Tom, we just paid a considerable amount of money to remediate the stormwater dingle that runs, next to our new DPW. That's part of the runoff from Franconia Golf Course.
That's right.
And, it seems to me the only way we have to enforce the collection of fees from organizations like this is through these licenses. I agree with Lynn. I mean, if there's no record, and I don't recall that ever happening or being told that it ever happened. If there's no record, there's no record. I have no clue what their stormwater fee is hasn't been paid, but after a few years, I'm sure it's due. But somebody needs to pony it up because, for us to continue to renew the liquor license fee when we know that the stormwater runoff is causing us added costs down that dingle would be nuts. I'd say we not vote on this yet.
Mm-hmm. Other members of the board have any comments? All right.
I'm not sure, Mark and Tom.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm not sure that drainage system was coming off the course. I believe it was coming off the buildings that are right straight across from the DPW. I don't know if there was anything actually coming off the golf course. The golf course is farther north from there.
But flow is from east to west in that dingle, Richard. So, the water's all part of the same. I don't know. There's probably a technical term for it. The same ecostructure and drainage system, in my opinion.
Well, no, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing, except I'm not prepared to make as strong a statement as you did because I haven't looked at the topography for the runoff there. But I do agree, if somebody deemed that they have stormwater fees and they're not paying them, then I don't know why we're approving their alcohol permits.
Yeah, and I guess another thing to think about is that I think we could start to move from here towards collecting those fees. The license is going to be $1,600. I have no idea what the fee is for the stormwater per year, and so it might be, a couple $100.
The outstanding bill is $2,800, I think, roughly. I can pull it back up.
I think it's just under 3,000 with the interest and things of that nature.
I will say that I know that the state has taken a stance on state-owned property that they will not pay stormwater fees. I don't know if that's a similar stance that a municipality is going to take against another municipality. We're looking into it now. This is a seasonal license. They were eligible to start serving on April 1st.
All right. So, what do you think?
What's the recommendation from the CFO and town manager? You guys are on the inside of this.
My recommendation is that you would approve it and give Paul and I the directive to continue to look for this agreement and review this with legal counsel, both for the town and for the city of Springfield. I don't like that this has been bypassed for so many years without being brought up to you, but it also doesn't feel right to not approve it tonight, given that we've approved it every other year.
We're gonna approve, I'd only approve it through June 30th. Because otherwise it's just gonna slide another year.
Okay, so you're saying that to finish the fiscal, well, of course, they don't work in the fiscal year, but they are town go. It is the city of Springfield owns the golf course.
I think we should approve it.
Without reservation, Mark?
No, I have reservation. There's an outstanding question of whether or not, stormwater fees are collectible by one municipality from another. If it is, I think we should, once we get a definite answer on that, we should. I agree with you, Mark. I think we should put the squeeze on. But this is we're talking about Franconia Golf Course, right? And then being able to serve alcohol. I think we might get a phone call or two if we say they can't do that.
But maybe we'll also get paid. That's why I said don't. I didn't say don't. Based on Lynn's recommendation, my comment was fine. We'll approve it through June 30th, but they got to come up with a decision by June 30th. Either we're going to come up with a resolution, or they're not. They're going to have to stop serving on June 30th. I didn't say don't approve it.
Right, but how would you, Paul, would you have to prorate the fee for the license, or is the license a set fee and then,
This is a set fee.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah, so.
But at the same time, I think you, last year, only charged a portion because of the COVID situation.
Well, no, we rebated half, Paul, for this year.
Okay, for this year. So, I guess you have some options if you, well, again, I'd have to look further too, because you treated everyone the same with the COVID matter, and here you're doing something a little bit different for one entity. I guess I'd have questions on that too.
I have a question. If we give this license, can we take it away before the season's over? Once it's given, it's given. Because once we can find out, yes, they owe us the money. We say, okay, pay up, and they don't, and it's legal. Then we could then say, well, no more license.
Yes, I think you can.
We have a recourse to
just give it to them to a certain time frame until this
after
is resolved.
Yes.
Would June give you guys enough time to get this issue resolved?
I would hope so.
Well, it'll give us enough time to give you an answer. Whether or not the resolution is what you want, it'll at least give you an answer on the direction.
Okay, so June would allow you to have enough time to research and bring it back to the board by the end of June.
Yes.
You're saying through the end of June, Mark?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Well, that sounds fair. That's 3 months.
Okay, is there a motion then?
I'll move that we approve the liquor license for the Clubhouse Cafe through June 30th,
Second.
2021.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mike?
Lakusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
No.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes. Tom, I think it'd be appropriate if we do formalize or somehow the request that the town manager and CFO follow up on this issue, report back to the board by June 30th.
Okay, so moved. Let's do that.
We have to report back sooner than that if it's too
Well, true.
Yeah, right, but on the 3rd June, so we'll, okay, so we'll look for something in the next couple of months, or next couple meetings, which is months and a half, 3 meetings, yeah. All right, and then the Citizens of the Year discussion, and Lynn,
Yes.
I'll let you take this up.
Yes, thank you. So looking ahead, knowing that you're receiving nominations for Citizen of the Year Award, and last year, having been my first time involved in this process, and also talking to Mike about what's coming up in the next few months, I did review how this has been handled before, and there is no exemption in the open meeting law to allow this topic to happen in executive session. So we need to look at another process for vetting these applicants that come in, or nominations that come in, and whether it's done in a way that's similar to how you handle board and committee appointments, or if you look at an entirely new process. I did put out a call through the Mass Managers Group to find out if any other communities have a Citizen of the Year Award. I did get 3 responses back. Town of Scituate does a Scituate Mariners Citizen of the Year. It's done through the local newspaper, and the awards are presented at a Chamber of Commerce type event. The town of Concord has an Honored Citizen Award, and it's all vetted through the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee. It's 5 committee members that comprise that group. And the town of Westwood has the John Cronin Public Service Award. It's definitely different than a Citizen of the Year because it seems to be more for public employees. But it is a committee comprised of the son of John Cronin, the chair of the select board, the town administrator, assistant town administrator, finance director, town clerk, the prior year recipient. So I wanted to present this to you tonight so that we could have a discussion, or at least let you think about this in advance of the next meeting, because I think this has to be taken care of before town meeting.
Huh?
I'm muted. Mark Gold, yes.
Yeah, I think we ought to do this through a town manager's task force where that includes 2 members of the select board and 2 prior award winners to come up with a name to be released at town meeting, but it's not done through the select board if that's the requirement.
Okay, but that's one suggestion, yeah. Any other ideas for the board? It's sad in some ways because it's been nice to have the input of all 5 board members on this decision. So it's going to be a big change in some ways for the way we've been operating in the past.
Well, we can still have our input time. We just have to do it in an open meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could still debate it if we wanted to do it. I tend to believe it may be better for all parties to have it slide off and go under a town manager's committee. I mean, it'll come back to us, but they can negotiate in private where we can't.
Yeah. And then so basically it would be 2 board members would be making this decision.
Well, the suggestion was 2 board members and 2 past award winners as part of a town manager's task force.
Now, how would we decide which 2 board members should be on there?
You can do it on a rotating basis. I don't know. 2 members who aren't officers. Pick lots, short stick. It doesn't matter. Just 2 people.
Or you pick the chair and the vice chair.
However.
Yeah. And we don't have to decide tonight. I just wanted to present you with the topic so you could think about it before the next meeting, and we can add this to the agenda for a vote that night.
Yeah. So let's give it some thought. I don't think there's a lot of disagreement. I mean, usually the candidates are pretty, so, but yeah, let's give it some thought about how we should do it would be the best way. And because there is the other option, we could just vote it out like we have for board appointments where people would just vote on candidates, but I think it would be better to do in private. It's true. So good. Well, we'll think more about it. Any other comments or questions on it?
The only thing I had, Tom, did you remember what that second award category was?
Oh, no, I couldn't. I didn't.
Well, that's okay. No, that's okay. Let it slip.
Old agendas. It might be in that article. I'll try to pull it out. But I think it was, yeah. Well, one was definitely for a person who did something just in this year, and I announced it in our select board meetings when we discussed. Sorry. This is the kind of thing that Deb House would have been right on top of.
I could look back and check on that information for you. For sure.
I'm not knocking you, Mike, but she had been here a long time. So, all right. So we move on to look for an adjournment.
I place a motion on the table that we adjourn.
Okay. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Foster.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 20th. Hope you can join us then. Thank you. Good evening.